Okay, and we're back. So, one of the things that the states have to do under the Clean Water Act is come up with water quality standards for their waters. Um, states create them. If they, aren't great, then the EPA won't approve them. Um, if they don't approve what the state comes up with, they have to come up with their own quality standards for their through the state through their own rulemaking process. But majority of the time, state comes up with water quality state standards. Different ways that things that they have to deal with. They have to figure out what the designated uses of the water are, the water quality criteria, and then the other thing that's kind of important is the anti degradation policies. So, um, designated uses are, the uses for I'm sorry, I don't like the way I organize this, but the uses for that water determine what water quality standards should be made. So, drinking water versus recreational versus, nothing, designated uses, right? And then they come up with the technical standards to get to the standard, to the technology needed to get the water to the quality for the designated uses. And then if you are in a place where like you have like awesome high quality water that exceeds all the standards, um, you're not like off the hook and can let any polluter do whatever they want. You have to have policies that ensure that this high quality water doesn't get worse, right? They call that anti degradation policies. Okay, so designated uses would be things like, is it drinking water? Is it recreational? Is it fishing? What is the designated uses? Um, if it's drinking, and let's just think of Lake Michigan, right? It's drinking, it's recreational, and, even like industrial, right? For Lake Michigan. So if the uses are multiple, then we go to, the highest quality one, and those are the standard. And you have to think of every use that has been used for that body of water since 1975. You can't say, "Oh, the designated use for this water is to uh, flush my waste from this place to that place," right? So that's not an appropriate designated use. Um, Fishing and swimming are kind of like things that they really want every water you to be able to do in under the Clean Water Act. So fishing and swimming would be kind of like your baseline, and then the higher use one would be the drinking water. If for some reason these fishing and swimming standards are unattainable, then we reclassify the water and we call it that's the downgrade process, and you need proof that we can't get there, right? So there's some toxic matter that's never going to go away, and then the state has to give proof that the standards for, say, fishing and swimming are unattainable, whatever. So one of the things I posted here in the module is our list in Illinois under the supplemental materials of, where are they? Week 9. Um, our Illinois waters, their filings with the EPA. So let me see what I have here. One is our Illinois water quality standards. Okay, so this talks about, and I'm going to just give you some time to look on at this on your own after our next little break, um, to determine, what are the uses of waters near your area, and if right, these are our water quality designations for Illinois, okay? And they're site specific. So you can kind of find like specific areas near your house and figure out what the water, the designation is there. The other thing in, oh no, I have to hit back, is a list of non-attainment areas that I'm going to kind of have you look at our next little break, which is posted again under the supplemental materials. But I'm going to go back because I haven't been, this lecture would be way too short for that. Okay. So, okay, so we have our water quality, our designated uses, and then we have to figure out on our use what is suitable for that intended use, right? So, what concentration of pollutants can we manage? What level of lead or are there any toxic chemicals or any toxic chemicals in any toxic amounts? Is there sediment, whatever? What's the appropriate temperature and pH? So temperature is a big thing because if if the water's too hot, then the fish die, right? Or you get algae, or pH, is it too acidic? Is it too alkaline, right? So there's federal criteria to figure out what's the appropriate level of these pollutants for that particular designated use. So, say you have like, okay, lead can be in some itty bitty level for say drinking or swimming or something like that. And then you have to come up with scientific formulas to reach what we call the total maximum daily load of that pollutant that a body of water can withstand to meet this water quality criteria. Okay. So, like, okay, if I put like, 1 ounce of lead in the water a day, how does that affect the entire body of water? Okay. And then so for each pollutant, which I think we're going to get to in a slide or two, there is a total maximum daily load identified. Okay. And then we figure out what our sources of that pollutant are, right? We have, again, our point sources, which is the waste load allocation, and our non-point sources. And we have to allocate that. So then if we're giving out a permit, which is the next step, we have to allocate what load of a certain pollutant can be discharged into that body of water and maintain that water quality criteria. Okay, so this is again the thing for the waters that are already like awesome and exceeding standards for their intended uses. Um, the states have to impose what we call anti-degradation policies to protect and maintain the uses that are being used. We want to keep these high quality waters being high quality waters and not have them degrade into just so waters, and then also protect natural resource waters. Okay, so that is again when we are already exceeding these standards, the state has to impose anti degradation policies. Now, sometimes there is mixing zones. Think about like a river or a lake, and then you have like something flowing into the lake, right at that point of flow, it's a higher concentration, and then as it goes as this water goes through the other water, um it dilutes. That's the word I'm looking for. So the mixing zone concentrations may exceed the criteria, but they have to figure out what it's going to be for after it goes into the main body of water. And then sometimes these water quality standards and total maximum daily load and everything like that, during certain times of year, there are provisos that you can be exempt from the standard during certain times of year. So if you're in a rainy season and maybe there's going to be a lot of overload with runoff from roads or something like that, or maybe like E. coli and all of that nastiness, or in drought because you have less water, there might be a higher concentration of some of these pollutants. There, you can provide for waiver during certain times. Either there's just a very rainy year or you have a drought season or something like that. Okay. So, monitoring. And really, the way that we deal with the the pollutants into the waters of the United States is by a permit system. And I think that's going to be maybe a little bit further in. So that total, so you figure out who is discharging from a point source into a water of the United States, and then we allocate the total maximum daily load of these pollutants that a water can withstand without exceeding the limitations. And then if you are a polluter and you want to put something into the water, you get a permit, and the state will tell you how much you're allowed to discharge. Okay, so then the states are in charge of then monitoring and testing the waters and monitoring the people for proper use of their permits. And they give the EPA reports. So there are two reports under the Clean Water Act: 305B, which is all waters, and then the 303D list, which are those that do not meet the water quality standards, impaired waters. So for those 303D lists, the states have a higher standard or a different kinds of standard than that TMDL. And they come up with their ones individually based on that impaired water. They're called individual control standards, ICSs, since they're never going to, meet those state quality water standards. So those two PDFs that I put in the supplemental materials are those reports. So one is the 305B and one is the 303D. So, when I'm done with this little lecture, I'd love you to look through those, check out waters near you, whether they're impaired, what are the pollutants they're dealing with, just to educate yourself and learn a little bit more on how the Water Quality Act, the Clean Water Act affects us in, a day-to-day basis or in our life and in our neighborhood and our area. Okay, so, kind of a little bit of an overview here of our Clean Water Act. Okay, so this and it's a federal statute, but really the state has most of the responsibility here. Okay, so with guidance from the EPA, the state identifies um, the in designated uses and the water quality standards, right? So what's an appropriate use, and what standard do we need? What level of a pollutant? And we come up with these TMDLs. And then the state is also in charge of monitoring the water to see if anything has changed. If your water already meets those water quality standards, then we put in these anti-degradation policies. And if it doesn't meet the water quality standards, like forever, it gets put on the 303D list, and then the total maximum daily load applies. And then you also have those impaired waters that we can't ever fix. But the bottom line is any discharge from a point source to a water of the United States requires a permit. So that's this is just kind of because I went through a bunch of different terms and a bunch of different stuff. But if you just kind of look at this is how the Clean Water Act works. Okay, so when we're talking about pollutants, pollutants is very broadly defined in the Clean Water Act. So soil, solid waste, sewage sludge. I don't know what the difference between sewage and sewage sludge is, but I guess there is. Chemical waste, radioactive waste, solid materials like wrecked or discarded equipment, sand, cellar dirt, rock, any agricultural waste. Heat, as I said, is important because say we just take in water to cool something, say equipment, that it doesn't even touch the equipment, and then we release that back into a lake or a river, and then it heats it up, like that can be very harmful to that ecosystem. So you don't think of heat as a pollutant, but heat is a pollutant. Munitions, biological materials. So that's all a pollutant. So, bad. So, different kinds of categories, your conventional ones: oxygen, fecal, oil, grease, toxic would be like metals and some sort of man-made compounds, chemicals like that. And then if you have a non-conventional that it's not man-made or metal, it would be called non-conventional. So there's just different categories of pollutants. And then this is how the Clean Water Act achieves its goals, right? So anyone who wants to dump a pollutant, one of those pollutants on the list before, into the waters of the United States needs to obtain a permit, right? And the permits are issued by the states, okay? And then they tell the dumper how much of each pollutant you can include in your discharge into that water of the United States. Okay, it's a nice little acronym called the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDES. And then so they're keeping track of who and what is being put into water. Um, and the NPDES system only applies to these point sources, right? Um, right. So from like a pipe, a canal, a ditch, a boat, right? So one specific place, not the non-point discharges. So the permit system comes from this NPDES. Okay. So these non-point sources, they don't get a permit. They don't need a permit. But they might, if they are just like introducing things into one of these sewage systems, the POTW, they're going to have to treat what they're putting out into the sewer, the seepage, before it goes out. Okay, so there's two kinds of pre-treatment things that they have to do. One, it would be technology based for things that are categorized, and then there's some things that are just like 100% prohibited. So things that you can't discharge. A lot of them are, materials that are fire or explosive hazards. Okay, so that is for non-point sources. Okay, so your permits, again, it's a state thing. Um, Permits are issued by the state. Now, there's maybe less than a handful of states that do not have their own permit program. But and then it would be the EPA. But and I think this is a quiz question. States issue these NPDES permits. Most states have this permit program. Um, and the states, to have an approved permit program, they have to have at least as many restrictions as, the feds require. Okay. And so they're designed to establish, they call it effluent. So effluent is like the flowing of water, right? How much stuff can you flow into the water that are appropriate to what you are being proposed, and then they're enforceable by the agency. Now, I don't want to, it's really boring, but if you go to page 228 of the textbook, you'll see the whole permit process. So, there's an application, there's time that the state has to look at it and, maybe monitor it and change it. And then there's, for these permits too, there's an opportunity for public notice and comment. The permits are only good for 5 years, and then that you have to go through a renewal process for your permit too. So it's, so that might be something, as a paralegal, something you might be working on. You might be working on these permit applications, renewal of the permit applications. Okay, so different kinds of permits are issued through the NPDES system. Okay, and super common, right? You have a facility and you are proposing discharging some effluent into a water of the United States. So your permit is going to be tailored to your specific facility. Okay, this is what I'm doing. This is my pollutant. This is where it's going to go, right? This formal process, whatever. Um, so that's something we can all kind of uh, process and figure out. Now, there's also a class of permit called a general permit. So say you have like, 4 power plants in in the same category. I don't know, coal or nuclear or whatever. So the NPDES system also has these, they call them general permits. Okay. So for any facility in the same category will have the same permit requirements. So those point sources must have common elements. The facility has to kind of have maybe the same pollutants, the same um, volume of effluent coming out, right? So that's your general permit. Um, if you then, after your renewal or reissuing after your expiration and you're renewing your permit, um, your new permit can't be less strict than the permit that is already out there. So, ideally you'd be polluting less. So they call that an anti-backsliding rule, right? Any renewed permits can't be less strict than the one you had before. So again, we're back to, paralegally type activities here on page 223. This is just, we looked at this under clean air. Um, this proposed chemical plant, um, we would be discharging the wastewater into the city-owned plant. So that would be a POTW. So we have to figure out, we have to get this pre-treatment agreement, right? We know we have to pre-treat before we discharge into the POTW. So the paralegal in that situation found, found out what we needed to do, contacted the pre-treatment coordinator to figure out what had to be done there. So that's just kind of an idea of one of the things that a paralegal might want to do. So here I'm going to stop so I want you to go to those uh, supplemental materials and look through our impaired waters, look through the pollutants, look at waters near you and see how they're doing. Are you is it non-attainment? Is it do we have a TMDL? I don't think really around here in Illinois we have any high quality waters that are on anti-degradation. But look through that. And then the other thing I want you to do before you have to listen to my nonsense again, is again do what would we have do here? Number, let's see, 7, 8, 11. Yeah, 7, 8, and 11 on the review questions. So that's it. Have fun with that, and I'll be talking to you again soon.